If you have ever looked into the tradition, you'll definitely know that the payment of dowries is very weird. An ancient deal where, instead of waiting for dad to kick the bucket, a daughter gets her share of the family goods when she ties the knot. So why is this ritual so important? And why haven't we gotten rid of it in all these years? The truth is that they might be more significant than you think. Before we continue, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on post notifications so you never miss any of our new videos. The funny thing about dowries is emotions don't really have a say in this old school arrangement. Dowries set up this kind of joint account for the couple, and the specifics can totally change from one case to another. The whole point of a dowry is to have a backup plan for a wife if she's left on her own or stuck with a not-so-great hubby. And it's not just about the dough. We're talking bed sheets, furniture, and even some farm animals if you're lucky. Bride price is not dowry. Certainly there's more to those age-old customs tied to the dowry. The bride price and dower are additional aspects to consider, but it's crucial not to confuse them with the dowry itself. The bride price, also known as the bride service, involves a payment from the groom or his family to the bride's parents. On the flip side, the dowry operates differently. It's a contribution that the bride's family makes to the groom or his family. Additionally, there's the dower, which encompasses assets that the groom provides to the bride during the marriage, while those assets remain under her ownership and control. The practice of bride price holds more prominence in societies where resources are limited, as it facilitates an exchange involving both property and women. This stands in contrast to the dowry system, which tends to centralize wealth and is prevalent among property-owning classes, commercial entities, or pastoral communities with significant land holdings. And when parents chip in with a dowry, they're basically covering their bases. They're aiming to make sure their daughter's future is locked in and nabbing the creme de la creme son-in-law deal. It's a pretty nifty arrangement, securing the future. So, when we talk about dowries, one of the key goals is to sort of act as a safety net for women, especially when there's a real chance of them getting a rough deal from their husband or his family. It's like this conditional gift situation. If things go south and the husband goes for a divorce, starts mistreating his wife, or pulls some other major stunt, the dowry swings back to the wife or her family. Think of it as a little nudge for the husband to treat his better half right. These little packages are crucial because dowries often step in to help the new hubby handle the whole marriage package. This is especially true with guys who tend to tie the knot pretty darn young. The dowry helps them set up their own love nest, which honestly would be a real challenge without that extra push. In lots of cases, the dowry also hooks up the wife with a safety net in case her husband kicks the bucket. Think of it like a stand-in for inheriting some or all of her hubby's stuff, things she won't get to cash in on. The whole dowry thing has often been a way for the bride's folks to nod back at the groom for shelling out when he paid up for the bride and was sort of strapped for cash. These swaps make the marriage legit and tighten up the bond between the two families, while also making both sides feel like they're giving and taking in a friendly way. The ancient practice of dowry. The practice of providing a dowry goes way back, even to the days of Hammurabi in ancient Babylon. Typically, daughters didn't inherit from their father's estate. Instead, they received a dowry upon marriage, aimed at offering some lifelong security based on their family's financial capacity. In a marriage, the husband was in charge of managing his wife's dowry as part of the family's assets. In cases of divorce without valid reasons, the husband was obliged to return both the dowry the wife brought and the bride price he paid. If the wife passed away without having children, her dowry would revert to her family. In ancient Greece, things were a bit different with the whole dowry scene. The common practice was to pay a bride price. The exchange of dowries didn't really start until the late classical period, around the 5th century BC. During this era, a husband had certain rights tied to his wife's dowry. On top of that, you've got the wife possibly bringing in her own stuff to the marriage, stuff that wasn't even part of the dowry and therefore totally under her ownership. This kind of property was beyond the dowry, and they call it paraphernalia property, or just extra things she brings to the table. Now, back in ancient Rome, they kept up with this dowry thing where the bride or someone representing her tossed in some assets to the groom or his dad during the whole wedding deal. Dowries were pretty darn common back then, basically happening because people wanted the bride's family and backers to pitch in a bit for the whole new household setup. And let's talk dowry specifics. It could be all sorts of property, not just from the bride's family, but anyone could chip in their own stuff as a dowry for the lady. You know, dowries aren't just a modern thing. They're actually mentioned in the Bible, and it seems like they played a pretty big role in all sorts of marriages back then. The deal was, the groom would give the bride some gifts, and it wasn't like buying a wife or anything, but more like making up for her dad losing a helping hand. Back in those Hebrew weddings, there was a whole lot of back and forth over how big the dowry should be. It could be money, things, or even some kind of service to make up for the woman's contribution. Sometimes the bride even scored a chunk of land as her dowry. As time went on in Jewish history, they got all official with written marriage contracts that spelled out the details of the dowry situation. Dowry in later times. Back in the medieval times in Europe, people were all about that dowry system. It wasn't just about making a gal more marriage material. It was like a power move for the big shot families. Believe it or not, it even played a role in deciding the borders and rules of whole countries. And when it came to fancy weddings, among the high and mighty massive inheritances were the name of the game. Picture the aristocratic and royal bride scoring dowries that could buy a castle or two. And guess what is even more interesting? This trend didn't fizzle out. It kept going strong for many centuries. In England, failing to provide the customary or agreed-upon dowry could lead to the dissolution of a marriage arrangement. In the Renaissance era, an interesting consequence for abducting or assaulting an unmarried woman was the imposition of a dowry requirement. Intriguingly, even nuns were obliged to furnish a dowry upon their entry into a convent. It's possible that this whole thing came about because parents back then sometimes sent their less conventionally attractive daughters off to convents. This way, their more socially desirable daughters could rake in those bigger dowries without a hitch. Imagine Victorian England. Dowries were like an upfront slice of the daughter's inheritance pie, at least as far as the upper crust was concerned. Money matters in marriages were as open as today's chit-chats about prenups. Yep, both sides spilled the beans on their money situation. So here's the deal for guys. They had to step up their game to match their wife's accustomed lifestyle. On the other side of the coin, women, keen on climbing up the social ladder, used dowries to sweeten the pot. Plus, wealthier folks in the community saw doling out dowries to less fortunate women as a kind of charity. Dowries still exist. The concept of dowries gradually faded in Europe during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Interestingly, in some other places, dowries actually gained popularity towards the end of the 20th century, defying governmental bans or discouragement. You'll still find the dowry system quite alive and well in many parts of the world, especially in places like South Asia and various Middle Eastern and North African countries. Strangely enough, some regions continue to insist on dowries as a prerequisite for accepting a marriage proposal, which is kind of baffling. And what's even more concerning is that, sadly, there are still reports of dowry-related deaths in some corners of the world today. By and large these days, most folks don't really buy into the whole dowry thing. It kind of feeds into the idea of women being overly dependent on their partners and doesn't quite align with the whole equality vibe we've been working on. The whole dowry deal sort of throws a wrench into the whole gender equality movement and kind of paints women in a bad light. And believe it or not, in some really extreme cases, it has even done way more harm than good. Do you think dowries are necessary? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Also, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel to see more videos like this. Bye for now.